What's up, everyone? Welcome into DodgerHeads, presented by DodgerBlue.com. My name is Jeff Spiegel. I'm joined, as always, by Daniel Starkin, and today is a trade deadline recap show. We didn't know what to expect with the trade deadline. A bizarre season, shortened season, tons of teams making the playoffs. We didn't know what to expect. There was a ton of action. The Dodgers did make a trade. There's conversations about the trade the Dodgers did not make as well. But Daniel, just from a big picture perspective, as you look back on the trade deadline, what are your reactions to everything that's transpired over the last 24 hours?
Yeah, I wasn't expecting too many deals, so I was a little surprised at how many deals we saw. The Padres pretty much put a whole new team together, which I'm sure we'll talk about. But there's a lot of teams that made deals. I tweeted early in the morning a little prediction that I didn't think the Dodgers would make any significant big moves. And although there was some noise about potentially Lance Lynn and maybe some other guys as well, I wasn't surprised to see that they didn't end up making that big move.
Yeah. I mean, and Andrew Friedman even said, we'll get to some of the stuff that he talked about, but yeah, it was sort of like they weren't going to make a trade just to make a trade. And yet, whether you consider it big or not big, the Dodgers did make a trade, and it's a trade of note involving a player that you have heard of, and it's not coming to the Dodgers for a change. It's actually leaving the Dodgers, and that's Ross Stripling. So one of the funniest trades, I think, ever, because the team announced it. I mean, nobody scooped this. The team put out a press release an hour plus after the trade deadline saying, by the way, Ross Stripling has been traded to the Toronto Blue Jays, currently located in Buffalo, New York, to join good friend Hyunjin Ryu for two players to be named later. Basically, the players to be named later means that right now teams can only trade players from within their camp. So a player to be named later basically means the Dodgers have traded for somebody that is not a part of the Blue Jays 60-person camp as a whole is the expectation as well. So Stripling gets shipped out. I think that was somewhat of a surprise. This is a guy who has 2 more years of team control. This is a guy who's been one of the team's 5 starters. It's not like right this second they're overflowing with starting pitching depth. And yet, when I step back, I can't say I'm surprised. I think Stripling was a guy they tried trading earlier this year along with Jock Peterson.
Right.
Jock was probably a guy that I was curious to see if they would try and move him, knowing that his deal's up at the end of this year. They kind of have an excess at outfield, but Stripling's the guy who ends up going. Andrew Friedman basically said he didn't have a chance. He wasn't going to have a chance to start here. Tony Gonsolin was about to replace him in the rotation. But overall, your reactions to Ross Stripling getting traded for a couple players to be named later?
Yeah, it wasn't a huge surprise for the reasons that you mentioned. They traded him once before. Ultimately, the deal fell through to the Angels before this season. But we knew that they considered him a bit expendable with some of the young arms they have. It sucks to see him go. Ross is one of the nicer guys in the organization. He's hilarious. He's great with the media. And he also, provided a lot on the field. He's very versatile. He went back and forth between the rotation and the bullpen, and you never heard a peep out of him. He never complained once. He did, he always did his job. And he was always, a great guy in the clubhouse as well. He's, a team favorite of the players in that clubhouse. So it's hard to see him go, but at the end of the day, he was definitely expendable. We know they wanted to get, more innings for Tony Gonsolin, get him in that rotation full time to see, how legit he is. So now that, Ross is gone, that frees up that spot in the rotation for Gonsolin. And as great as the bullpen's been, they didn't really need, Ross's assistance there either. And he deserves a chance to be a full-time starter somewhere. So he'll get that in Toronto. But at the end of the day, the Dodgers weren't losing a whole much. We don't know who they're getting back yet, but I'm sure Andrew Friedman either has done or will do his homework and get some under the radar prospects that, who knows, maybe a year or two down the line those end up being top 100 guys.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you kind of hit on sort of the headlines for me. The first is that, I mean, as much as people like Stripling, I mean, that's talking about how nice of a guy he is, how well liked he is. At the end of the day, he wasn't pitching well. His last outing, 4 innings, 3 earned runs. Before that, 4 innings, 2 earned runs. Before that, 3 innings, 6 earned runs. He had a 5.61 ERA this season. He hasn't had a start in which he didn't allow a run. I mean, his first start was great, 7 innings, 4 hits, 7 strikeouts, 1 earned run. Every start from there, 3 earned, 4 earned, 2 earned, 6 earned, 2 earned, 3 earned. He's pitching less and less and less, going less than 5 innings in his last 4 starts. And so at the end of the day, they're not giving up much for this year because they can easily replace that production with a guy like Tony Gonsolin. And I think at the end of the day, you touch on a couple other things. First of all, in years past, you would say, well, the Dodgers need help in the bullpen, just slide him in there, but they don't need help in the bullpen. We talked on our last show, guys like Julio Urias, Tony Gonsolin, whoever doesn't make the rotation, there's not necessarily going to be an automatic slot for these guys in the bullpen compared to years past. So I think that's another piece. And then you just factor in who's coming back next year. I mean, the Dodgers have David Price coming in again next year. Josiah Gray will be part of the rotation at some point. You can pencil Dustin May and Tony Gonsolin in with Kershaw and Buehler and David Price. There's 5. What do you do with Alex Wood? What do you do with Julio Urias? Stripling's number 8 on that list. Not to mention younger guys, again, like Josiah Gray, who's going to be pushing for time at some point.
Mm-hmm.
So I think for all those reasons, this makes a ton of sense. It's weird for the best team in baseball to actually be giving away the best player in trade. But I also think they honored Ross Stripling. They said, you've got 2 years left in arbitration after this year. And as long as he was with the Dodgers, he was going to have a ceiling. Now he gets a chance to go out and be the starting pitcher he wants to be. And if he can prove himself to be a number 3, number 4, even number 5 starter consistently for the next couple of years, he's going to make himself a good amount of money. So I think they did right by everyone in this situation. It's bizarre to be thinking about it, but I actually really like the trade. And as you said, we trust Andrew Friedman. It sounds like, based on his quotes, they have one guy that they know they're getting back, who he described as somebody who would sort of be a part of almost the next wave of guys to come in. So somebody who's maybe 2 or 3 years away from making an impact. And then it sounds like the second player is going to come from a list that the Dodgers are going to do a little bit of digging on and pick somebody off of that list. So it sounds like they've already got some guys, and you just trust the Dodgers. I mean, Josiah Gray, someone we just mentioned, was a throw-in in a trade like this a couple of years ago. Jeter Downs was the other one, and he was part of the trade that brought Mookie Betts. So there's complete trust, but I would say it's surprising because of who it is, but when you step back, you realize this makes a ton of sense.
No, yeah, exactly. When you start to think about like a postseason roster, you kind of ask yourself, would we trust Ross Stripling as a member of the rotation? And, the answer is probably no in the postseason. And then you start to ask, well, can he be a high leverage reliever? And the answer again is probably no. So that leaves his ceiling as pretty much, a middle relief type guy who could give you multiple innings, which it's valuable, and it's definitely valuable in the regular season considering, his versatility of being able to start or relieve. But once you get to the postseason, that's a role that's, kind of easily replaced, and they got plenty of other young arms that they want to take a look at. So I don't blame them. And yeah, like you said with the farm system thing, it's never – the reason this organization has had so much success is because not only have they been able to win the division every year, but they've also been able to maintain, a top 5 farm system. And it's because, sometimes it's because of deals like this where maybe we don't, we straight up don't know who the prospects are right now, but, and even when the trade goes down, we may have never heard of them. But then 1 to 2 years down the line, all of a sudden, they're top guys just because of the Dodgers, player development system, their coaching, all that stuff. So, it's not like a huge eye-popping trade deadline deal that a lot of people were hoping for, but I definitely think it's a deal with a long-term outlook.
Yeah. And I mean, I'll just add one last bit. The Dodgers also, I mean, at some point you can only have 25 guys on the 25-man roster and 40 guys on the 40-man roster, and they have all these young guys that they're going to have to start protecting. And so at some point, some of these trades, you just have to open up space on the roster, let alone actual playing time. But let's shift to what you were just talking about, because I think if you said, hey, the Dodgers made a trade involving a starting pitcher, and it's a guy who's pitching at the big league level right now, everybody would have assumed that player was coming to Los Angeles. The big rumored name was Mike Clevinger at one point. He goes to the Padres. We'll talk about that in a moment. But Lance Lynn was the name that was gaining steam. And I'll admit, I'm always skeptical when an hour before the deadline, you hear something like, I'm hearing the Dodgers are in on Lance Lynn. Because to me, that's like, hey, anybody who's in on Lance Lynn, the Dodgers and their big farm system are coming in, so you better make a better offer. So I was skeptical. I'll admit that. But looking back, I mean, now that the dust has kind of settled, would you have preferred, now cost, I mean, is obviously a massive factor, but would you have preferred to make a move for a guy like Lance Lynn knowing what the cost may have been, or are you content with the Dodgers staying put?
I was cool either way. I trust Friedman's judgment. I don't know what those conversations were like. I don't know who they were asking for. So I absolutely would not have overpaid. If the price was right, I would have done it. But considering how much other interest in Lance Lynn there was, I'm guessing the Rangers asked for a lot, and I was a little surprised that they ultimately decided not to deal him at all.
Yeah.
This is kind of when his value was at its highest. Who knows where it'll be in the offseason or at the trade deadline next year. He's under control for one more year, which that also kind of made it a little bit appealing to me, just because it wouldn't strictly be a rental.
Yeah.
It would be a guy you have for one more season at $8 million, which that's pretty team friendly. That's not anything too crazy. So, I've been high on Lynn, as I've talked about on this show. I think he would have been a nice addition to this rotation, a guy who could eat innings and pitch deep into games. But at the end of the day, I didn't see a need to overpay. This team has everything it needs to accomplish their goals.
Yeah, and I mean, I loved, again, going back to Andrew Friedman, by the way, had a press conference today, and you can go to Dodger Blue 1958 on YouTube, probably where you're finding this video, and you can find Andrew Friedman's, it's about an 18-minute press conference reacting to a lot of the questions that he got from the media. But one of the things that was asked of him that I think is something you and I have talked a lot about on this show is the fact that the first round of the playoffs is a 3-game series has to have an impact. Like, somebody asked, does that impact the way you do this? And Andrew Friedman's answer was the right answer, which was, well, it has to. Like, it has to impact the way that you do things. And so are you really going to go all out for a guy like Lance Lynn? And all out meaning, I mean, he's a high-end guy, so you're probably not trading. Like, let's say you can put together a Clevinger type package where maybe it's not one of your top 7 or 8 prospects, but maybe you're having to give up, prospect number 9 and prospect number 16 or something like that to get a guy like Lance Lynn, when this year there's about 25, 30 games left. So he's only going to make 4 or 5 starts for you. And then in the first round, a 3-game series, I mean, he's obviously going to be one of your 3 starters, but that might be it. I mean, you could lose 2 games, random fluky things, and it's over with. And so to me, that's why I'm out on, first of all, this 3-game first round series to begin with. Like, I hope this is it. I hope we never see it again. And Friedman kind of said, he's like, hey, as a Dodger person, we're obviously against this. Now, I'm not thinking big picture, but that's why I didn't want to make a move like Lance Lynn. I mean, yes, he's here for another year, but we've already talked about, like, whose spot is he taking next year? David Price is getting paid a ton of money. Kershaw's back, Buehler's back. So there's 3. And then, Dustin May, Tony Gonsolin, Julio Urias. You've already got too many starting pitchers a year from now. Now, Lance Lynn is the best, probably. He would be the number 3 starter in this scenario, maybe 4 that I just talked about. But it's not like it's a desperate need, and even next year. Now, they could have flipped him, in the offseason, something like that. But at the end of the day, for me, Lance Lynn didn't really move the needle. Mike Clevinger would be a different story for me, but Lance Lynn, I'm okay with nothing happening there. But I mean, I think that brings us to sort of what maybe even as Dodger fans, kind of the biggest story of this whole trade deadline, which is the Padres. The Padres are this team that have been talked about. Their day is coming. Their day is coming. Their day is coming. Top farm system, Tatis. They add Machado. They've got Hosmer. They have all these young arms that are coming up. And it's just like the Dodgers just kept hearing someday, someday, someday. Well, it appears that day is here. And now take it with a grain of salt, because it's not the first time that the Padres have dominated a trade cycle. And last time it didn't work out so well. They were trading away Yasmani Grandal for Matt Kemp. So, I mean, it didn't work out so well for them last time. I think the industry is much higher on what they're doing now than what they did last time. But the Padres go out, they add arguably the best arm on the market in Trevor Rosenthal. They add a guy like Mitch Moreland, who's hitting .328 with 8 home runs, an OPS of almost 1.2 as a platoon guy. They had 2 new catchers. I joked on Twitter that they're about to find out what it's like to have a designated hitter and not to have Austin Hedges, a.k.a. somebody who hits like a pitcher batting 9th. And then on top of all of that, they add the absolute gem of the whole trade deadline, which is Mike Clevinger, a young elite ace that was on the market, that's under team control for a couple more years. And somehow they do all of this while maintaining, depending on where you look, either 8 or 9 of their top 10 prospects. So I think that's the part that pisses me off the most as a Dodger fan. But I mean, the Padres, are you worried? Does what happened in the last 48 to 72 hours worry you as a Dodger fan?
No, I'm not worried. But let me start by saying that the fact that AJ Preller felt the need to go out and acquire, what was it, 8 or 9 players?
Yeah.
just shows how far behind he felt that his team was compared to the Dodgers. So at least props to him for recognizing
Yeah.
that. And also props to him for kind of going all in a little bit. Like you said, they didn't give up a lot of their top prospects, so they didn't mortgage their whole future.
Yeah.
But they did dip into their farm system and get rid of some, future guys for, some veterans that could help them win now. So props to them for that. Um, Obviously the big deal is the Clevinger one. That's a guy that both of us are very high on. He's, when healthy, he's one of the 10 or, top 10 or top 15 best starters in the game. So that's a big addition to their rotation, and they get him for 2 more seasons after this.
Mm-hmm.
So their rotation's looking good, but I'm not going to sit here and say I'm super worried that they're going to beat the Dodgers. The Dodgers are still the class of baseball as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
Every team was looking way up at them going into this deadline, and that's also why I think we saw some teams didn't necessarily make the big move that they could have made, just because they realized, maybe this isn't as wide open as everyone's making it out to be. There's that team in LA who's just destroying everyone. They haven't lost a series all year, so. I definitely think the Padres got better. I like what they did, but I'm not ready to say I'm worried that they're going to beat the Dodgers in the series.
Now, let me ask you this: does this worry you for the next 3 years? I mean, does this like I guess I'm asking, does this change your perspective on how competitive the National League West is going to be for the next 3 years?
Yeah, I mean, I always saw the Padres coming, and I thought 2021 would be the year that they finally, are maybe, close to the Dodgers or on that same level where they could compete for a division. As good as the Padres have been this year, they're still 5 games back.
Yeah.
And, in a 60-game season, through 30 games to be 5 games back, that's not really a small deficit right there.
Yeah.
But I do think the Padres are going to be, maybe arguably the Dodgers' biggest competition in the NL, not only this year, but for years to come. They got more guys coming. As we said, they didn't give up any of their top guys in any of these trades. So they, in addition to Clevinger, they're going to be getting, Mackenzie Gore is going to be in that rotation eventually.
Mm-hmm.
Luis Patino. Those are two of the top young arms, in minor league baseball. So I think the Padres are coming. I don't think they're going to challenge the Dodgers all that much this year, even with the additions they made. But I do think, starting next season, that could be a team to watch out for.
Yeah, I think I mostly agree with you. I mean, as you said, they're 5 games out. Now, the Padres, interestingly enough, are the second best team in the National League by record. So when we say they're 5 games out, it's an impressive. It says more about the Dodgers than it does about the Padres. I think you add in a guy like Clevinger. I think the Clevinger piece is interesting to me just because of the playoff implications more so. I mean, now you have guys like Clevinger, and then you've got Paddock, and then you've got Lamet, and I mean, those 3 are pretty solid. Now, behind that, it's like Garrett Richards, some guys that maybe you don't feel as great about. But and then offensively, I mean, again, they've been doing this legitimately with a catcher who cannot hit. I mean, he hit against the Dodgers, but the guy's hitting like below 200. He genuinely hits like a pitcher. Now, he's great defensively, so maybe we see a dip somewhere in there. I mean, or we're just going to figure out the catching defensive metrics are all just complete bogus. Anyways, I don't know, but I think it's interesting to see what the Padres do. And again, what worries me is just that they didn't really, yes, they dipped into the farm system, but they didn't dip that far. I mean, they dealt guys like Austin Hedges, who was a major leaguer, so he's not one of their top prospects, but he was sort of one of their graduated prospects. So they did some stuff like that. Quantrill was another name, Taylor Trammell, a couple guys that were big pieces that they had or had come from other places. But it'll definitely be interesting. I'm with you. And this was kind of my message before the trade deadline is just, hey, reminder Dodger fans, like before the trade deadline and after the trade deadline, the Dodgers are still going to be the best team in baseball. Yeah. And somebody on Twitter was pointing out, like, if the Dodgers had traded for Mookie Betts right now, everybody would be losing their mind. Instead, they've already got Mookie Betts. He's already been crushing it. So it's like, It's just not the hot new thing. The Dodgers, you just look at the roster and you say, okay, Betts, Bellinger, Seager, Turner, Muncy on offense, Buehler, Kershaw, the best bullpen in baseball. I mean, it's like there's not much to see there. Now, you and I both, hey, if we could have added a guy like Clevinger, maybe. But literally, aside from Clevinger and maybe Lance Lynn, there's not a single move I would have been interested in. There's not a single guy that changed teams that I was like, well, that guy would have been nice. Because any bullpen arm would have been like, who's he replacing? Kolarek, because Kolarik's been great. So I think it's interesting. But yeah, I mean, the Padres, They're for real. They're for real. They're here and they're not going away. And part of me loves it because it means that my Giant friends are going to be just, in misery for the next decade. And that makes me happy. Part of it worries me because there's going to be a time in the next few years when the Dodgers finish second in the division and have to play in that stupid 1-game wild card game. But this year, the second best team in the National League just got better. And that should concern us a little bit. But at the same time, we can look at it and say, but the Dodgers are still plenty good to win the World Series. This isn't going to be, if the Dodgers lose and don't win the World Series, it's not going to be because of what happened today. I think that's my bottom line statement. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I do. That's exactly how I feel as well. And I think one thing to keep an eye on with the Padres, at least for the rest of this season, is they did go out and acquire 2 new catchers. So
yeah.
both of their guys behind the plate, while they are definitely offensive upgrades over Hedges, they got to get to know a staff. And there's only a month to do that. It's not the usual July 31st trade deadline where now you still have 2 months before the playoffs.
Yeah.
We only got, even less than a month here, like 28 days until the start of the playoffs. So that's something to keep an eye on. They got 2 new catchers. They got a new pitcher who they're calling their ace. So those guys got to get on the same page, and they don't have a lot of time to do it.
Yeah. And I think the one other thing is it's just a young team. So, for so often you see guys like Seager and guys like Bellinger and some of the younger guys struggle for the Dodgers in the postseason. There's no reason to assume that for the Padres it's going to be different. Now, it might be. I mean, maybe the Dodgers just have the wrong young guys and guys that just won't figure it out in the postseason. We sure hope that's not the case. But it does feel like some piece of that. And their bullpen's not what it was, and their bullpen hasn't been great, even with Rosenthal. So I think there's still some holes there. One other bit that I'll just clear up NL West-wise, the Rockies added Michael Givens, who's a setup guy who's been good, 1.38 ERA, 19 strikeouts in 13 innings. So that's a nice little get for them. I'm not really sure what the Rockies are doing. They're obviously competing for the third place in the NL West, which potentially could get them into the playoffs. The Diamondbacks, on the other hand, Robbie Ray is out, Archie Bradley is out. So if anybody can name a pitcher on the Arizona Diamondbacks at this point, good for you. Good for you. Congratulations. Maybe Zach Gallen. Yeah, Gallen. Aside from Gallen, who's insane. Anyways, sucks to be a Giants fan. Sucks to be a Diamondbacks fan. Probably sucks to be a Rockies fan too. But so that's that. I mean, I think at the end of the day, this was a more exciting 48 hours than anybody was really expecting. I think a name like Clevinger getting moved, obviously, it's impossible to think that wasn't influenced by what he did earlier in the year by lying to his team. And, he wasn't being mentioned, although I guess he was rumored a little bit in the offseason, him and Lindor is possibly getting traded. But I think that's got to play a role. And if Clevinger hadn't been traded, we'd probably be looking at this and saying, pretty ho-hum stuff. Like if Trevor Rosenthal is the best name that gets moved, it's probably not all that exciting. But at the end of the day, a pretty exciting one. So there's your trade deadline recap. We did get a couple questions, so let me throw these at you. One we've kind of already answered. This came from Twitter. It said, why do so many Padres fans believe that their team is on par with or even above after the Clevinger trade? I think you and I both kind of just talked this out. We still see the Padres as a step below. But, I mean, do Padres fans have any ground to stand on thinking that they can go toe-to-toe with the Dodgers?
Look, Padre fans have a right to be excited. They got some good players. They already have some a young superstar in Tatis, Manny Machado. That Manny Machado guy, he's pretty good too, even though, people don't necessarily like him. But he's definitely a good player. So they have a reason to be excited, but I think we need to cool it a little bit on saying they're on the same level as the Dodgers. But let's see them beat them on the field before we go that far.
Yeah. I mean, and the playoffs, there's an element of variability or randomness, whatever you want to call it, when it comes to the playoffs. So just because we say the Dodgers are the best team and they're better than the Padres isn't us guaranteeing a World Series. I think we would both agree that the Dodgers have been the best team in baseball at least once, possibly multiple times in the last few years, and didn't win the World Series. So those two things are not equal, but that is something to keep in mind. Here's the second question. This comes from Jabba the Homie on Twitter. He says, with Stripling out of LA and Gonsolin getting a spot in the rotation, what is your rotation order in a 3-game and then a 5-game series? So 3-game series, you've got Kershaw and you've got Buehler in some order, number 1 and 2. If you had to choose right now, your number 3 starter is who?
Right now it's Dustin May.
Okay.
He's been fairly consistent. We know how great his stuff is, and I think he's only going to continue to prove with each start. He's really young, obviously, and just getting his first real taste of being in a big league starting rotation. So I think this next month will be big for him as far as improving. But I think right now he's clearly been the third best guy in this rotation.
Yeah. I'll throw a curveball at you. And it's not that I'm low on Dustin May. I'm still baffled by, and I'll talk to this in 3 up and 3 down here in a little bit, but his strikeouts per 9 is mind blowing to me. Him and Gratterall are the 2 worst strikeout guys on the Dodgers. And if somebody could explain to me how that is, but I think it's a sign of youth. But again, I'll get to that. I actually am starting to believe that in a 3-game series, I wouldn't be shocked if game 3 or definitely game 4 in a 5-game or 7-game series could be a bullpen game. I think the Dodgers have the arms out there. They could do basically what they did against the Giants, where maybe Caleb Ferguson starts and gets you a couple innings, and then you just go down the line and see what you can get out of guys like Victor Gonzalez or Kolarek or Floro or Trinan or, any number of guys. So I'm starting to wonder if part of the reason that they moved on from a guy like Stripling is because maybe they have a little bit more confidence in something like that. Maybe you find someone along the line. Maybe it's Ferguson, former starter, who can get you 3 innings in there, or Victor Gonzalez. But I'm not ready to say that I would choose that over Dustin May today. But the follow-up to this question is, if you had to go basically to a 5-game or a 7-game series, who's your rotation? I definitely think that's in play for game 4. I'm not sure it's in play for game 3, but I don't think it's out of the question right now. I mean, do you any agreement there? Do you think a bullpen game is in play, or do you have May? And I'm assuming number 4 for you might be a guy like Gonsolin. Are those two sort of, have they distanced themselves enough to say they're apart? Because I mean, Urias could be a part of a bullpen game too, or Gonsolin, or any of these guys, I guess.
No, yeah. I don't know if you need to start a reliever. I still think you could start a May or Urias or Gonsolin in those games 3 and 4, but you definitely are going to have a quick leash just because of how many good arms you have down there in that bullpen. Whereas with Kershaw or Buehler, you might let them work through some early inning struggles. Maybe with May and Gonsolin, you don't give them that opportunity just because of how good your bullpen is. So I think you're definitely onto something. I'd still start May in game 3. And then game 4, I think we just need to see between Urias and Gonsolin who looks better, the rest of this year. They're obviously on the same team, but in a sense they'll be competing with each other for that 4th spot. And they both also have history as relievers, so whoever doesn't make that rotation could easily be. It could be, a piggyback situation where maybe Gonsolin starts, throws 3 innings, then you throw Julio in there for 2 or 3, and then, you get the rest of the bullpen. So I definitely think we'll see them getting creative. I don't know if they're going to have, the opener like some other teams do, but I definitely think they will be creative with the bullpen.
Yeah. And I mean, Gonsolin's one to watch just because he's so new that you wonder, his last start was his worst start yet. So you just start to wonder, is the book getting out on Gonsolin? Are guys going to start picking up and hitting him more? Whereas a guy like Urias has been around for long enough that there's probably a little bit more of a scouting report. So, something to watch, but I definitely think that's going to be one of the talking points is beyond Kershaw and beyond Buehler. And obviously Alex Wood's a guy who's coming back. Friedman mentioned him multiple times. And so maybe that's somebody they're high on, that he can regain something that they thought they saw in the summer. So definitely something to keep an eye on there. So, well, let's shift gears. And every week for DodgerBlue.com, I'm putting out an article called 3 Up and 3 Down. And it's basically looking at the last week of games and saying, what are the big storylines? What are the 3 positives and 3 negatives? So, Daniel, let me share my 3 with you, and then you can react as we go through. But the first one, as far as a positive storyline to me, 3 up, number 1, is Cody Bellinger. Now, his average is only up to 225. He was only 7 for 24 in the past week. But the swing is starting to look better for me. He had 7 hits, 4 were for extra bases. He hits a home run on Saturday and Sunday, brings his season total to 10 on the year. For me, Cody Bellinger is a positive storyline. Things seem to be heading in the right direction. Again, even if that average is still really ugly at 225, it feels like things are getting better for Bellinger. Are you sensing the same thing? I mean, I don't know if I'm wanting to believe this, and so I'm just looking at it, because 7 for 24 still isn't great. It's an upgrade over where he's been, but it's still not great. Am I wanting to believe something, or am I seeing something for real?
No, I definitely think he's improved at the plate as the season's gone on. And the thing is, they don't need him to be the guy that he was in the first half of last season when he was, or by far the best player in
Yeah.
baseball. He was on a tear. He was batting 400 2 months into the season. They don't need him to be that guy. This lineup has so many other guys that could do damage. They have another MVP in Mookie Betts, who's playing like an MVP right now. Corey Seager's playing like he belongs in that MVP conversation. So as long as Bellinger is just playing, at an all-star level, or getting his home runs, getting his hits,
Yeah.
working counts as he does, I think that's definitely a plus player. And we've seen, what this offense is capable of. It hasn't been consistent yet to start the year, but they got so many guys and seemingly getting better. Gavin Lux is the guy they just
Yeah.
called up. He's going to be batting ninth for them in a lot of games. I'm not sure if you'll get to him, but Will Smith is also swinging the bat well. So this is a really long lineup, and they don't need Bellinger to be the guy.
Yeah.
They just need him to be, part of the puzzle.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't want to keep harping on the Padres thing, but as you're saying that, I'm thinking to myself, is there an element, starting rotation, lineup, and bullpen, in which the Padres, are there any of those three that you would say the Padres are better? Because you probably, the storyline would be, oh, their lineup because of Slam Diego and all the home runs and all these things. Well, guess what? The Dodgers just set the record for most National League home runs in a month, which is slightly misleading because the designated hitter just came out this year, but I don't mean to be a Debbie Downer. But I mean, yeah, it's like you have Tatis. Okay, they counter with Betts. Well, who do the Padres have to line up with Bellinger? Who do the Padres have to line? I mean, maybe Machado, although Bellinger's been better. And then for Seager, and then Turner, and then Muncy, and then Will Smith. I mean, it just, you go down the list and it's like maybe one or two of those guys are going to be better. But out of 1 through 9, the Dodgers are probably going to win 6 or 7. Then you go to the rotation. Buehler, Clevinger, probably about a push. Kershaw is clearly better than Paddock. Now, maybe
Right.
number 3, maybe you like a guy like Lamet a little bit more than you like whoever the Dodgers number 3 is, but you definitely like the Dodgers number 4, 5, 6 better. And then you go to the bullpen, and the Dodgers have one of the best bullpens in baseball. It's not even close down there. So I think that, when you think about a guy like Bellinger struggling, and yet the Dodgers still hit more home, Slam Diego. Well, who hit more home runs? Oh, the Dodgers hit more home runs than the Padres last month. So let's just put things in perspective. I know it's not on, it's not trending on social media when the Dodgers hit all these home runs, but the Dodgers are really, really good. So I don't want to harp on that, but I think Bellinger is the number. I mean, if Mookie can do what he is doing and Bellinger can get his crap together and start to look 85 to 90% even of what he was last year, it's going to be a wrap. So number 2 storyline for me, and this is something we talked about earlier in the week in our last episode, and it's just a fun story for me, and it's a guy I've already mentioned, Victor Gonzalez. I just love this story. It's a guy who was signed at 16 out of Mexico, the same time as Julio Urias. Urias gets all the attention, all the love, rightfully so, one of the best prospects in baseball, whereas Gonzalez is just grinding it away in rookie ball and A-ball, high A-ball. Then he gets Tommy John surgery, and yet here he is. He gets his major league debut, and the guy's been fantastic. 9 innings, 2 earned runs, 8 strikeouts, 1 walk, just 6 hits allowed. He's kind of been the fill-in guy, multi-inning, long relief kind of guy, but it's not the biggest story. This might not even be a guy that makes the playoff roster at the end of the day, but from a storyline perspective, I love the Victor Gonzalez storyline.
Yeah. Yeah. And I also think his, emergence could also have, something to do with the reason that they decided to trade a Ross Stripling, because he's kind of filling that, long reliever type role in the bullpen, multi-innings, which, if they want to give Gonsolin a look in the starting rotation, they would have moved Stripling into that role. So I think they want to get a bigger look at Gonzalez. He's looked great. We talked about this on the last show, but what we once thought was this team's biggest weakness, and that was left-handed relievers, has arguably become their biggest strength. This Gonzalez is a guy they've just kind of been hiding. He didn't, start the year in the bullpen, got called, been back and forth a couple times. But now, it looks like he might be here to stay, and I'm really excited to see what he could do.
Yeah. Okay, number 3 for me, and again, this one will be quick. It's just Clayton Kershaw. I mean, another start, another gem, 6 innings, 4 hits, 0 walks, 4 strikeouts. He's the ace of the staff right now. He's 4-1 on the season, and in a season in which the rest of the starting rotation has been a roller coaster. Walker Buehler's on the IL. Urias has been up and down. May has been up and down. Stripling is out. Wood is hurt. Price opted out. I mean, amidst all of that, Clayton Kershaw has just been rock solid. We had the one start, his second start, where everybody was questioning whether or not he needed to retire. I think he has put those questions to bed. But, I mean, there's not really much to add to that other than Clayton Kershaw, another gem for the Dodgers, the guy that has just been rock solid and is huge for the prospect of success over the next couple months for the Dodgers.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think the best part about what I've seen from Kershaw is just how healthy he's looked.
Yeah.
He started the season on the IL with, the back issue, and obviously that's concerning just because of how many other injuries he's had in the past. So, but since he's gone back, he's looked like, the healthiest he's been in years, and he's pitching like it too. His velo's up. He's commanding pitches a lot better. He's gotten deep into games his last few starts. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, like you said, he's looking like the ace right now. We're still waiting for Bueller to get on that level. There's no doubt he will, but we're still waiting for that. So Kershaw's the guy right now, and I think another great thing is that he's gonna be fresh going into the postseason. He's not gonna have 180, 200 innings under his belt. So that's gonna be good to see come October.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, three things that are concerning me. And again, this is always the hardest part of the column to write for a team that wins every series and just, wins most of the baseball games that they play. But I mean, the first one is something we've already talked about. The negative storyline, if you will, is just the Padres got better. The Padres are officially competing with the Dodgers for the next month, as well as for the next 3 years, as well as for the next 5 years. They added an ace, they add two catchers, they add some bullpen arms. So we've already hashed that one out, but that's one thing to watch, one storyline. The next one, again, related to this conversation we already had, but it's the Dodgers rotation. I think there are weeks when we sit here and say, oh my gosh, the Dodgers are flush with arms. Like, what are they going to do? How are they going to get all these guys opportunities? And then there's weeks like this week where it's like, okay, Bueller's on the IL, Wood's on the IL, Dustin May has been good but not great. Urias has been good but not great. Gonsolin has his first tough start of the year. And all of a sudden it's like, do the Dodgers have any starting pitching outside of Clayton Kershaw that you feel good about right now? So I think it's interesting. And this is where, I mentioned Dustin May is striking out 5.91 batters per 9 innings. It just makes that, I don't know how that is humanly possible. He gets so many swings and misses. It feels like he's on so many viral video clips. And yet I don't know if it's just youth. Because Gratterall's the other one. So it makes me just think, are these guys, are they just all talent and maybe they haven't quite figured out how to pitch and how to sequence things and how to hit their spots? As somebody who played a little bit more baseball than me, is it as simple as that? Or are they just, the stuff is there? Why aren't the strikeout numbers there?
Yeah, I think that's part of it. And I think with both of them, they just kind of lack a true put away pitch.
Yeah.
Both of them only kind of throw two pitches. The sinker for May, and then he throws a cutter. He throws a breaking ball every once in a while, but that's really the pitch I think he needs to improve if he wants to start putting guys away. Because as great as throwing 99 or 100 is, if that's really all you could do, or that and one other pitch, it makes it easier for guys to just kind of sit on the fastball.
Yeah.
But with that being said, they might not be getting, the big strikeout numbers, but they are, finding ways to get outs.
Yeah,
So that's
absolutely.
definitely a positive. Like you said, that they're both really young, so that's going to come with time and experience. But I think they do both need to work on, a third pitch and getting a little more change of speed, so hitters aren't quite sitting on the fastball as much.
Yeah. To be clear, Dustin May's got a 2.83 ERA this year. He's
Yeah.
a whip of 1.17. He's got 23 strikeouts. So the guy is just fine. But as a younger guy, there's some things, and I'm not saying this is an area of concern. I'm looking for three things that are areas of concern in order to make this article work. And so, but that is something to watch. They got 25 days. I'm confident they will figure it out, but it's definitely something to keep an eye on. And the last bit of news is just some injury stuff that's starting to pop up. As I said, Walker Buehler's got blisters. They said he might only miss one start. Justin Turner, why he was trying to steal second base. I understand it from a baseball perspective and game situation, but Justin Turner should not be stealing bases. Yeah. Seems like he tweaks his hamstring. They're going to reevaluate sort of how he's feeling Tuesday to see what happens. Hopefully by then everything's healed up. But that's the other thing. Andrew Friedman mentioned it in his press conference. The Dodgers have been very fortunate from an injury perspective this year. And I just hope that continues. With Walker Buehler blisters and Justin Turner hamstring, those are two very, very, very integral people. Top 5 most integral people on the roster, and both of them have slight nagging injuries and something to watch going forward.
Yeah. As long as they're minor injuries, it's not like a huge area of concern. I think they're sitting out probably more than they need to, just because the Dodgers have, a comfortable lead and they can afford to do that. They have great depth, so the guys they're being replaced with are also very good. So I think they could afford to be cautious and give them as much time as they need, which is a good thing. But yeah, until there's like a key guy goes down with a major season-ending injury, I'm not going to be concerned about guys getting banged up. That happens throughout the course of a season, and we still got a month here until the playoffs. So I don't think it's time to start getting concerned
Yeah,
just yet.
absolutely, absolutely. Well, anything on that list that I'm missing? Maybe a positive storyline from the last week of Dodger baseball, or something that caught your eye, and maybe just something to keep an eye on for the next few weeks.
I also think, in addition to Cody, we've seen Max Muncy start to hit the ball pretty well the last couple weeks. So that's definitely good to see. That's another guy who got off to a slow start.
Mm-hmm.
Hasn't really looked like himself at the plate this season, but I mean, if he continues to trend up, that's another guy who's going to be batting like fifth or sixth in the lineup, who is definitely capable of batting second or third in any given lineup. So I think that's another positive for the offense. It's been a lot of kind of Mookie and Seager carrying them all year, and Pollock was doing well at the beginning too. So it's good to see those other guys starting to come around, as we said they would.
Yeah.
We've said all year, those guys will come around. So it's good to see them finally doing it.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And Will Smith's another guy you mentioned as well. I mean, the numbers, the batting average doesn't look there, but you look at his OPS, you look at his hard hit percentage, you look at sort of the underlying numbers, and that's a guy that's just crushing the baseball, and it just maybe hasn't started to materialize. So I think that's a positive sign. Austin Barnes is hitting well. Chris Taylor's been all right. So they're getting Edwin Rios back. I think there's some positive things there for sure. So, well, that's what we've got for you tonight. An exciting trade deadline, maybe a more exciting trade deadline than we were expecting. Even the Dodgers getting in on it, shipping Ross Stripling out, which is a sad day for the organization and for the clubhouse. But I think if you look at the long term from a strictly baseball perspective, this is a trade that makes sense. It's a trade that the Dodgers are probably adding a prospect, maybe two, that they can either develop or use in a trade next year or in the offseason when they need to, which is a good thing. And then the other big storyline is just the Padres. What do Mike Clevinger and Trevor Rosenthal and Mitch Moreland and all the catchers that they acquired, what do all these guys do to change the fortunes of this franchise, not only this year, but in the future? Definitely something to keep an eye on. So check out DodgerBlue.com for the latest as the Dodgers get ready for the couple series they've got coming up this week. Check out our YouTube. Like I said, that Andrew Friedman interview or press conference is up. It's really good stuff. So check that out if you would like. And we will be back likely later in the week with the live Dodger Heads after one of the games this week, so stay tuned for that as well. Dodger Blue 1958 on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, all the things, DodgerBlue.com as well. So we appreciate you joining us. We appreciate you watching. Daniel, have yourself a good night, and we will see you all next time.